Thanks everyone for being here today. My name is Garrison Kurth. I go by Garrison. You can
That's what the jargon
reach me here at the Department of Taxation. I'm going to give you some information at the end, so if there's any other questions that arise, you know how to get them to us.
Do you want to hear
Just
this?
as a
No, should I
background
tell you this?
of me, so you know who I am.
The excise
I
tax.
spent about 20 years working in insurance claims. Wasn't directly medical, but it certainly dealt with medical. It was with farmers insurance, so everything they cover. After that, I spent some time as a radiology technologist, so working in the hospitals and with doctors and stuff. So I have a fairly good idea of how things work, but not necessarily in billing and all that. So hopefully I'm helpful today. I'm currently an attorney and I work here at the Department of Taxation in the Rules Office. So what I thought I'd do here, we've been getting a lot of general questions and they overlap with some of the questions I saw that had been forwarded from Kathy here. So I thought I'd just kind of give a quick background of the law here, and then just kind of cover some of those questions. And I think they'll answer a lot for you, but they might generate more in addition to any other questions you might have. So feel free if there's something, it might be easier, I guess, for me to just go through this. It's fairly short, and just note any questions you have. And then at the end, I guess we can cover anything that comes up, and I'll try and do the best I can. So to start, I do have to tell you that I can't, I guess this is the disclaimer and the attorney and me, and when we answer these questions, what we can do is give you the general information, the general responses, the general resources on what's going on and how to work with this new law. I can't give you specific direction, especially as far as, you know, how to run your office or do your books, or I'm not an accountant, CPA, thing like that. So with that, let me just read this here. Just a little disclaimer we always put on here. Just please note that DOTAX cannot provide tax planning, legal advice, or make formal tax determinations based on our general discussions today, email inquiries, or scenarios. Every taxpayer's issues are different, have different tax obligations and filing requirements depending on how you practice your business and everything is set up. So we try to provide general guidance where you can find the tax laws that are relevant and the guidance we put out on them, and try to explain that as best we can. If we're unable to do that, or that guidance doesn't answer your question, sometimes you'll just have to consult with a professional tax person or a legal advisor to follow up on that. So that's my disclaimer. I'm going to go ahead and share this document I've got here on the screen. So I might disappear for a while, but I'll be in the background and we'll certainly pop back on here as necessary. I'm sure this will work here. All right, can you guys see that?
Perfect. General responses, right?
Yeah, and let me see if I can make that bigger so it's easier to read. Okay, is that a little bigger?
Perfect.
Okay.
Full screen.
So essentially, in 2024, during the legislative session, a House bill and a Senate bill were both introduced by various regarding providing a tax exemption under the law for medical providers. It worked its way through the legislative session, and at the end, the final version allows for the exemption of healthcare related goods or services that are purchased under the Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE program. So it's a pretty broad statement, and that's where it's left. There's no real delineations or anything that pulls that back. So in front of you is what it actually now says in the Hawaii Revised Statutes in the tax law regarding that. So it takes effect on January 1st. I'm just going to go ahead and read this real quick since it's up here, because this is the law. Amounts received by a hospital, infirmary, medical clinic, healthcare facility, or pharmacy, or medical or dental practitioner, or healthcare related goods or services purchased under the Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE programs are not taxable. For the purposes of this paragraph, the healthcare related services need not be performed by a medical or dental practitioner, but may be performed by physician's assistant, nurse, or other employee under the medical or dental practitioner's direction. As used in this paragraph, defines what Medicaid means. And then it also defines what a medical or dental practitioner means, and Medicare and whatnot. So you can look at that. I'm going to hopefully share this at the end with Kathy, and anybody who wants a copy of it can get it. So essentially what that means is that, let me pull up there is a list. Basically, you have to be one of the described providers within that law. I think it's easier to just show the list I have here. It's a tax. Pull it up here. Tax information release that we put out earlier this year. Just make that a little bigger. And it lists out from that law I just read who qualifies for this exemption. So you have to be one of these eligible taxpayers on the list: a hospital, infirmary, medical clinic, healthcare facility, a pharmacy, physicians or osteopathic physicians licensed under Chapter 50 or 453, dentists licensed under Chapter 448, APRNs licensed under 457, or pharmacists licensed under 461. The scope of the exemption, and I guess while I'm there, one of the questions we've been getting is, what is a healthcare facility or a medical clinic? So they're not defined within the law itself here, but they are defined under the Department of Health in the law. And basically, it's either one of those is a facility that provides treatment. So we've had some people contact us and say, hey, I'm not a physician, a dentist, an APRN, or a pharmacist, but I run a healthcare facility. Do I qualify for this? And the general answer is yes, you would. The caveat to that is, and I think this goes without saying, but you have to be a licensed healthcare facility or a medical clinic within the state of Hawaii, and that's a regimented system, as most of you probably know, under the Department of Health. But as long as that's the case, and you're being paid by one of these entities, Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE, then this exemption applies to you. There's, like I said, no delineation in the law that takes that away for healthcare facilities, medical clinics. Go back here. And as far as the scope of the exemption, it applies to any amount received by an eligible taxpayer, so someone on that list there, healthcare-related goods and services purchased under the Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE programs. It includes amounts directly received from those programs, and it includes what I would call the peripherals, meaning your clients or your patients' co-pays, co-insurance, deductibles, anything like that also qualifies. So it's the entire charge, regardless of who's paying it. It just has to be covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE. And then the balance that the patients may owe you is also exempt. There is no delineation, again, in the law under the Medicaid, Medicare, or TRICARE program. So, there's different parts to, say, the Medicare program. There's Part B, C, and all that. There's no delineation. So anything that qualifies as a Medicare plan that's paying the bill, paying the patient's bill counts. There's nothing, at this point at least, that says those don't count. So it's a pretty broad exemption. It covers basically anything that's administered under the Centers for Medicare and Medicare Services, known as CMS, and then TRICARE is the Department of Defense Health Agency. And again, basically what it's saying is that pretty much anything paid for under those programs is presumed that this exemption would apply to, because there's nothing that says it's not. So if there's to change that, there would have to be a change in the law. So the legislature would have to do that. There'd be plenty of notification if something like that happened. It wouldn't take effect immediately. It would be, at least a year or more out, but we would certainly let you know of any changes. This is a next section here was what I was talking about earlier about the healthcare facility. So I'll make sure we share this just so you have it. But basically, to summarize, is if a healthcare facility that's licensed in Hawaii is recognized by Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE as a healthcare facility, qualified to receive payment under their programs for healthcare goods and services, they should qualify for the exemption. There could always be some exceptions. I've noted that there. It can be errors or mistakes made or fraud, but generally, you're going to qualify for the exemption if that's the case. The other big question was about tax forms, and the tax forms will be updated. They have been updated. I believe they're now approved. They'll be posted. The plan is by the end of the business day on January 2nd, 2026. I'll pull the forms up in a minute and just go over that. They're not. It's not any newfangled thing about how you claim this. So I'll show you that in a second here. The some people were asking, do I need to have some kind of certificate? Do I need to apply for the program or anything like that? No. This is like a lot of taxes. It's basically self-assessed, meaning that you as the taxpayer determine whether you qualify for the exemption or not, and you report it that way. And so the important thing about that is to make sure that you keep records, just in case a question arises, an audit, anything like that, showing why you claimed it. But it'll be reported on the forms the same way you would claim most other exemptions at this point. You pull those up. All right. So this is not the actual revised form. It's 2023, but it'll look the same. This is the actual form G45, and at the end of the year, you also file the G49 as a compilation for the year. But essentially, what you'll do is your services and your gross income will report it under number 9 here, the column A, for services, including professional, as I believe they are now. And then you will determine based on who you received payment from, whether it was Medicaid, Medicare, or TRICARE, they qualify for the exemption, and you just exempt that out and carry it over to column C, where you obviously take column A minus column B as column C. So it's the same thing a lot of you probably do now. You just have to figure out the Medicare, Medicaid, and TRICARE payments and include them in that amount. So that form will be pretty much the same, but the new form will be on our website and available by the end of the day, January 2nd, 2026. You also, when you fill out that form, if you take exemptions, you're required to fill out Schedule GE with it. And this is, I believe, the new form, barring any further changes or updates, but it's the same process as you do now. You just have to report the amount of exemptions claimed, and you have to code them correctly. There is a new code that will be used specifically for this. It's on the back side or page 2 of this form, and it will be exemption code 160, which I've highlighted here. And again, this will all be available to you, so you'll see it. But so again, hopefully this will be similar to what you're already doing in your practices and bookkeeping, and it's just some new codes and some new figuring in. So. And again, the important part, like any tax, especially when you're self-assessed tax, is make sure you keep good records. You are required under the statutes to keep records if they're requested in case issues arise or an audit comes up. So it's important to keep records to show why you claimed the exemption. In other words, keep records of who paid you so you can show that it qualified for the exemption. One other thing that's come up, and this is not necessarily a tax law, but if you're in the state of Hawaii, if a tax does not apply to a sale, whether it's a good or a service, you are not to put the tax on the invoice. Again, it's not a tax law, but their state consumer protection laws require you not to do that. So just a reminder that on your billing, you probably should make sure that if this isn't exempt, you're not billing the patient and adding tax, even if you don't claim the tax, even if you exempt it, you don't want that on your billing. So mistakes always happen, but in general, you should be looking to figure out how you can not include GE tax on your invoices for these exempt payments. That's the gist of the questions we've gotten so far, and I think that answers some of the questions that were provided to me. So what I wanted to do at this point is, I'm sure there's questions out there, or there may be questions that arose from what I've said here. So if we can just open things up here, I'd be glad to try and answer what questions I can.
There is a couple questions. What if a provider has opted out of Medicare?
Well, if they're not being paid by Medicare, there's no exemption that's going to apply to them. I guess that's the simple answer, unfortunately.
And I suppose their patients would then, if they've opted out, they have no Medicare patients, but they may have Medicaid or TRICARE patients that it would apply to.
So what happens, so I understand in that case, if you have so you've opted out of TRICARE and a patient comes in that's covered by TRICARE?
Well, yeah, it would be Medicare, but yeah. So
Medicare.
you would have to give the patient an invoice that would then be submitted by the patient to the insurance company, who would then pay the patient, but the patient wouldn't add on any tax. So it would be the patient's problem then, but if you're trying to tell them how to do it, they submit your bill, Medicare pays what they pay, and that's that,
Gotcha.
right?
Gotcha. So I guess the question really becomes, does the patient benefit from this exemption in that situation?
Yes.
So, and that's a good question. I haven't heard that one, and I'll have to check on that. So what I thought I'd do is, if there's anything like that that comes up I can't answer, I will follow up and get, again, written report back to you that can be shared, hopefully, through your channels to people, or specifically to who may have asked that question. So
Absolutely. Okay, couple more
unfortunately,
questions.
I can't answer that today.
All right. Another question is, is payment from Medicare Advantage programs such as HMSA's Akahi Advantage also eligible for exemption?
Yes. I mean, again, anything that's related under the Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE programs, it doesn't matter whether it's a state program, federal, whatever it is, if it's sanctioned basically by CMS, by the Centers for Medicare, then it will be exempt.
And so even if it's a per member per month payment, that should be tax exempt, because that's how some providers pay. There's some, yeah.
When you say providers pay,
Sorry, that's how some insurers pay the providers.
oh, okay. And yeah, I guess the key there would be, if the payment being received, regardless of how often or what program it's under, if it's payment for services or goods, then it should be exempt.
Got it.
So,
okay. Another question is, does Medicaid, quote unquote, include the entire Quest integration program? For example, the payments coming from HMSA Quest, Ohana Health Plan, United Healthcare Quest, those are coming from commercial payers, but they are TPA for the Medicaid program. I think the answer is yes.
yes. Yeah, again, I mean, I know there was some question too about private versus public, and I assume that was, not being in that and dealing with this all the time, but that would be public insurance versus private insurance patients. And yeah, it doesn't matter, as long as it's Medicaid, Medicare, or TRICARE, and it's being paid under that program for services or goods, then it would be exempt.
All right, next question. You're doing great. Should ER providers paid by HEPA, so they're salaried, currently be paying GE taxes? If not, then what current exemption code prior to 2026? I think the answer is, if you're employed, you're not worried about these general excise taxes. The employer is.
So there are some situations, but yes, to answer your question, yes, it's your employer's issue. Most ER doctors are going to be at the hospital, which are probably exempt anyway, depending on the hospital. But so yeah, you wouldn't necessarily have to worry about that. There are some situations, and I know you had forwarded a question earlier from someone about they work on a 1099 basis or they provide services. And generally, there is some provisions in the statutes about, and we've had this question come up before, let's say a dentist or someone, but they're working on a contract basis, I guess, with an office. And typically, it depends on the setup, and it's not a question I can just say blanket across the board applies to everybody, because there are certain provisions that need to be met. And I can get that to you in an answer so it can be shared. But typically, the provider in that case may be subject to paying a wholesale tax rate of 0.5%. as long as the office that he's working for is paying the GET at the full rate. So, but there's a couple other steps in there, so it's important to make sure. But and in that case, if the patient is being paid for if the services are being paid by Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE to the office, who's then turning around and paying the doctor, that would be exempt. So it shouldn't matter in that sense, the setup. So that provider may have only been paying 0.5%. So they're not going to gain as much in that situation as if they were running their own practice and paying 4.5%. So.
Great. Next question is, how would we get a copy of the resources presented? I'll answer that one. I'm recording this. I will put the recording on the AHEC website as well as HMA's website, and I will send the link out to all the doctors I have emails for, which hopefully is where you heard about this session. If you don't get a copy of the resources and you want them, I will put my email right here in the chat, which is just withy@hawaii.edu. You probably get too many pesky emails from me anyway. Do payments from telehealth services providers, sorry, they're coming in so fast, I lost track. Let's see. Sorry. Do payments from telehealth services providers for Teladoc MD Live qualify for exemption?
Well, I mean, they would, as long as you're one of these eligible taxpayers and it's, it would be for a service. So, again, it's hard to make a blanket statement that, yeah, it would apply to everyone. It just depends on whether you qualify. I mean, if you're running, and this is, what's a healthcare facility again? So if someone, if a doctor, let's say a physician is doing a telehealth appointment, then yes, they're a physician, they're licensed, and they're providing treatment to a patient, even telehealth, as long as it's being paid under these programs, it would qualify. There's no exclusion or anything else that would take that away that I'm.
All right, we kind of have a correction to our Medicare question. If you opt out of Medicare, the patient cannot submit it to Medicare. So the patient would still be billed for the general excise tax. And that
Okay.
makes sense because then they're cash pay,
Right.
I guess. So
Right. So,
they would be billed.
and I think that's correct, but let me follow up on all of that self-pay and opt-out stuff just to make sure, because that's a new one that hasn't come up. And in the course of this bill working through the legislature, I don't recall it ever being discussed. So let's make sure we're right.
Okay. And Angeline asked, and I think this one was already answered, does the exemption also apply to co-payments collected from Medicare and Medicare Advantage patients?
Yes. So,
Yes.
I mean, essentially, the way to probably look at it is if you have a patient come in and their visit is going to be paid by one of these programs, everything to do with it related to the service or a good would be tax exempt, including what they have to pay out of pocket.
Next question is under HMSA's payment transformation program, which is a per member per month payment, this is different. Are quality payments from HMSA Quest also exempt? So this would be a extra payment for taking care of patients paid from HMSA for Medicaid members to a provider. So I would think yes.
So when you say an extra payment for services, what does that mean? Like,
Okay,
why would they be making such an extra payment?
Oh, so the way they've structured their payments now is you get a set payment every month, and then you get it's kind of like, it's not a bonus, but if you meet a certain quality standards threshold, you get additional money in on top of your monthly regular. So it's for taking care of patients. It's for taking care of Medicaid patients.
Okay. And who's paying it? You said HMSA, but is
it? Insurance company through MedQuest division money.
And I'm going to double check on that, but I agree with you. I mean, I can't think of a reason why a payment made for services under one of these programs would not be exempt. So I think you're right, but let me just double check.
Okay.
All kinds of little nuances here.
What about if we never charge the GE taxes to Medicare and TRICARE, do we still get the GE tax exemptions? So we don't charge, you're paying them to Hawaii, so you're not, you're asking if you never charge them to patients? Because we're talking about paying it to the state of Hawaii. What about we never charge the GE? Is this a what about? Why don't we question? Anyway, so yeah, you saw how reporting was on the forms, and so when you pay the taxes on the income you bring in from seeing the patients, you won't pay the general excise tax on your Medicare and TRICARE patients. I hope that answers your question. Sorry.
Somebody's background or something.
Yeah, sorry about that. There we go. Okay, next question. Helena, if you wanted to ask more about that, just break in. Let's see. What if you're an independent contractor taking care of Medicare, Medicaid patients being paid by an organization, hospice, that gets their funds from Medicare, Medicaid, and TRICARE? Well, if you're an independent contractor, you're not getting paid by Medicare or Medicaid directly. So you wouldn't have been paying the general excise tax anyway. But ha you have to pay.
You might have to pay that 0.5%. It just depends on the situation. So, I mean, and again, I'll double check this one too, but it seems to me, I mean, if you're being paid for services you provided to a Medicare patient those services are being paid by Medicare, even if it's through another party, because it's going through the practice office before you get it, I think you're exempt too.
And if it's your salary, you don't pay general excise tax on that. You just pay income tax on that.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Alan asks, is VA, which is part of TRICARE, also exempted?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, again, it's hard to say across the board. There may be little nuances that come up that we haven't thought of, but I mean, if the payment is being made by TRICARE, then yes, it's exempt.
All right.
For services or goods.
Okay. Let's see. What if patient has a private insurance as primary, like HMSA, then Medicare as secondary? Would the primary payment from HMSA be exempt if they don't pay the tax? Since Medicare is secondary and the Medicare won't pay the tax and it can't be billed to the patient either. Let me tease this out. Okay, somebody has two insurances, HMSA fee for service or HMSA private is the primary. So you will pay the general excise tax on the primary payment, but if whatever Medicare pays, you will not pay general excise tax on. Did I get that right?
And I think that's the answer too. I mean, that's the question and the answer. But yeah, I mean, if it's not being paid by Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE, then doesn't meet the exemption. So
Does that make sense, Leah?
it's a private payment. If a different insurer than those three, anything under those three programs is paying, it doesn't fall under this exemption. So kind of a unique situation there, but I know it happens.
Yeah, when we still have a little conversation about the cash pay patients, we're going to find out about that. Okay. Oh, okay. I am a 1099 contracted physician for a hospice organization. I believe 99% of my patients are Medicare or Medicaid. How do I go about exempting myself from GE taxes for my 1099 contracted work?
And that kind of falls in with what we were talking about. So as far as, I guess the first question I have is, are you paying GET at this point? Because the practice probably should be, or are you paying wholesale? If it's affecting you. And then I need to make sure that, if someone is paying GET now as a 1099 contractor, and in that scenario, they do qualify for this exemption, is it done on the same forms in the same way? And I think it would be, but again, I'll add that to my 1099 questions and get that back to you with answers.
All right. This is a good one. Is tax exemption based on service dates or check payment dates? For example, I see somebody in December. I see somebody today, but payment is given in January. It's the visit date.
Typically it's based on how you do your accounting. So whether you do it on a cash basis, which is what the tax department presumes you do, unless you show otherwise, or an accrual basis. So, a cash basis basically is the date of payment. Accrual basis there's actually a couple of different factors that come into play there, but it typically tends to be more the date of payment. It just depends, but So that's my answer there right now. And again, it's a good question. I don't think it's going to be any different than that. It just depends on whether you run your practice and do your bookkeeping on a cash basis or accrual basis.
And I will get you this chat.
Yeah.
Okay. When we build Medicare and TRICARE, there are no GE taxes were allowed. So do we still get the Hawaii tax exemptions? I would say yes, because when you submit your GE tax form, you get to exempt them from paying GE tax.
Right. So, I mean, you're showing, like I said, on that form, you're showing this was my gross income. This amount of it was paid by these providers, so I'm exempting it out.
Here's a related one to the 1099 question. Independent contractor being paid by a nonprofit clinic on a 1099. So the nonprofit clinic is probably not paying general excise tax. But I've been paying general excise tax on my payments. Am I not supposed to?
Well, and it's interesting, but again, it's a question I can't answer. There's too many little factors, and part of that will be answered. So if we can I'll get you back the 1099 information on how you qualify for the 0.5%. And if you don't, then yeah, you should be paying the GET. But if you have qualified for this and have been paying it and shouldn't have been, that might be something where you need to go back and file amended tax returns too, because maybe you paid something you haven't. But it's just not an across the board statement I can make that you do or don't qualify. So let me get that out so you can get it out to people as to how that process works, and they can kind of look at their own situation and see if there's an issue. And then, if they have follow-up questions, we can send them into the department here. And again, we can't, scenarios are interesting because it's hard sometimes. There's too many other factors that can change things, but we'll try to give you the best answer or guidance we can.
Okay, and she says HMSA, Medicare, and TRICARE are not allowed for GE tax charges when submitting the claim. So that should be fine. But it's when you are, let's see, Juanita says, when we file the monthly GET G45 form tax, there are two columns. The exempt columns would contain the tally of the exempt, and the other column would contain all fees for service, including the exempt tally. Or is it just the non-exempt income? You showed us the form. The first column, is that total income or is that
Yes.
non-exempt? Okay, so
Right.
total
So
income.
column A is going to be your total income from services. Then column B is going to be what you're claiming is exempt, which results in the column C, A minus B equals C.
Got it. All right. What is current code if you qualify under the first past of this statement, the first part of this statement? Medical services rendered at a nonprofit hospital, infirmary, or sanitarium are exempt from the general excise tax, while the same service rendered by individual or group practices or clinics are fully taxable. That's the current exemption code. What is current code if you qualify under the first part of this statement? I think they're asking what the exemption code is for medical service rendered at a nonprofit hospital. Is that
The
what you're
actual
asking,
code?
Tori? Yeah. Doesn't matter because it's changed. Well, no, it wouldn't change because,
No, it wouldn't change because the 160 is specific. The new code 160 is specific for this Medicare, Medicaid, and TRICARE. I'm thinking that's probably under nonprofit organizations, which is 30, code 130. So
code 130 possibly. Don't hold them to it. All
yeah,
right.
that's nonprofit. So.
I think this one goes back to the 1099 question. If you're a consultant for Tripler Army Medical Center and paying general excise tax, would this be an exemption? Is that
Well,
yeah.
I mean, you have to be, again, you're going back to the list of eligible taxpayers. So a consultant, what is that? What are you consulting on? I mean, you have to be one of those identified providers, either a doctor, a dentist, or a medical clinic or healthcare facility. So, I mean, again, that's a tough question to just say yes or no. It depends on what you're consulting on. if you're being paid under, if the money being paid to you comes through those services for good or through Medicare, Medicaid, or TRICARE for the services you're providing, medical services or medical goods, then yeah, I mean, you could say that you should qualify, but it just depends. Again, that's why the scenarios is tough because there's so many little factors. So,
And this would be at Tripler, which is a military hospital, so it's considered public, but it's not on our list. It's not Medicare. It doesn't come through Medicare or Medicaid.
no, it'd only be TRICARE.
TRICARE, it doesn't come through VA. So it's actually separate from our list.
When you
Okay,
say
so
separate from what list?
our Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, the law.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah,
Did
and
I?
that might be something that that person who asked the question can send an email into us with a little more detail, and we can kind of look at it,
Mhm.
see if we, if there's enough that we can kind of guide them in the right direction or not. And before we end here, I'll pull back up my.
And that's all the questions I have. Did I miss anybody's question? Feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
I had a question. Thank you for putting on this session. I've always been confused. So, I'm the ER provider that works at a nonprofit hospital, but the contract is covered by HEPA and I'm paid by a private for-profit group. Am I exempt from paying GE tax if I provide these services at a nonprofit hospital, but being paid by a for-profit group? Or do I do wholesale services or full GE tax up until January 2026?
So, are
Are
you
you?
employed by the hospital?
No, I'm employed by a ER contract group that
Okay,
has several contracts for hospitals and ERs on the island,
right.
and other outer islands as well.
One of the ER physician groups.
Yeah,
Um,
but I'm an independent contractor for them.
right. And I'm not familiar enough to be honest. Does the ER group pay taxes, paying
Yeah,
GET taxes? Or
I
are
would
you paying them
imagine.
individually now or?
Well, because I'm an independent contractor, I thought I had to pay GE tax, but
Well, and again, with that 1099 thing, depending on how it's set up, you are subject to GET taxes, whether it's wholesale or at the full amount of 4.5 or 4.712%, as it turns out, is dependent on those factors, which I can't answer that for you right now. But again, I think the intent was to, I'm just thinking back to the intent of this law, and it was to try and keep doctors here, make healthcare a little more affordable, make it easier for you as providers to stay on the islands and provide service. So ultimately, if you look at the big picture, if the payment you're getting is from one of these programs and that's what's funding it, I would think that you would qualify to be exempt also. I don't know if that's really what's happening in your scenario. And again, it might be something I ask at the end here for you to send us an email with your, more of your specific details. Take a look at that. Try and see if we can
So
cover it.
you might have to have HEPA give you a breakdown,
Yeah.
of the patients you saw and what percent were TRICARE, Medicare, and Medicaid every month. That sounds very messy.
Yeah. See, that's where I don't know how all that works, and we don't get into the accounting part of it. So I don't know how you would track that or what they do now, or it's interesting.
If you're,
what email do we email you with our questions,
oh,
or what is the department of, because I think I emailed some Department of Tax, organization. Nobody ever got back to me. What's a good email where we can get our questions answered for our
Okay, yeah, let me
specific
pull this up. I
purposes?
mean, basically, we'll have you send it. I would normally probably tell you to send it to me, but I'm going to be on a temporary assignment here for the next couple of months. So let me pull this back up just so it's in front of you guys.
we do have a couple more questions. All right.
So this email at the end right over here, can you guys see that?
Tax,
Text,
technical,
text hold on section of Hawaii.gov. So if you
section.
send your emails there, it will be assigned to a specific technical or rules person, depending on the complexity of the question. They'll get back to
So it's tax.technical.section@hawaii.gov. And I put it in the chat. Okay. If Medicaid patients see me as a cash pay patient, would they still be charged GET? I think that relates to the Medicare question.
Yeah, the same. So if, and that was, I thought you said two patients there, but if a Medicare patient is paying cash to a provider,
Do they then submit the bill to Quest? Or are they just going cash? Because if it's cash, you can charge them the general excise tax because you have to pay it.
that's fine. And that's a distinction. That's one of the questions from earlier I want to clarify before I say yay or nay or try to provide an answer there, just because.
Yeah, don't listen to me. I don't know, but I'm just guessing.
Well, I just, the whole purpose was if you're having to pay GE tax and you're being paid under one of these programs, then it would be exempt. But if you're not being paid under one of the programs, that seems to be a problem.
Right.
And so if you're not, if you've opted out of Medicare, but you're still seeing those patients, that's one of those little wrinkles that I'll have to look.
Same
I have that
for
on my list
Quest.
already.
All right. Last question I have, does CHAMP VA qualify?
Does what now?
CHAMP VA.
Champs VA.
Is that just
Is that
another
under the
VA
TRICARE
insurance?
or the Department of Defense? I'm not familiar enough to know to say, but I know, Champus became TRICARE, but Champs A, I'm not sure what that is or where it falls. And again, if, I'll check. Champs A,
CHAMP VA.
Champs VA.
All right. More questions?
And the only thing I can say at this point is if that's under the TRICARE umbrella, then it should qualify. I'm just not familiar with that program to be able to say it.
All right. Anybody else? Perfect. I will get this on YouTube. It will be at ahec.hawaii.edu as well as the Hawaii Medical Association website.
And
All right.
Kathy, or what
Say
I'll
again?
do, I'm sorry, Kelly, what I'll do is, once we're done here, I'll forward the documents that I had put up here. So if you're able to, maybe you can attach them and somehow post them on there. So access, but whatever you need to do there. And then I will follow up on these other questions and issues and get something back to you in writing so it can be shared. So.
Perfect. And Derek Ching asks if there's any movement to get commercial insurances GET tax exempt as well. I'm not sure, but I had heard rumors about that, but I don't know what the status is because we haven't seen what's introduced this year in the legislature.
I'm not aware of what's coming as far as bills being introduced, and we probably won't know here till around the middle of January when they're probably available.
Yeah.
So I know it's, it was an issue even with this bill when it was passed in 2024. And it's being, discussed and considered, but I don't know. I guess the only thing I can say, and this is probably more from a personal point of view, is with all that's going on in the world right now and the government, and federal government, and cutbacks and things, I'd be surprised at a lot of further tax reductions, at least this coming year, but we'll see.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Garrison. This was succinct and delightful, and I will send you the chat as well as the full session, and hopefully you can get more information to us, and we very much appreciate it.
Well, thank you all. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Happy
Everyone have a great day.
holidays.